Is this the coffee grinder that belongs on your counter? Let's find out. The Fiorenzato All Ground is manufactured in Italy, and it makes the bold claim that it's going to be the only grinder you need. But is it for you? It comes in at $1,100 US, which makes it more expensive than grinders like the Barazza Forte or the Eureka Mignon, but less expensive than grinders like the Rocket Fausto or the Mazzer Mini grinders. Now, what sets it apart from all of these grinders is that none of those ones do espresso and filter coffee really well. All of those and most grinders in this price range tend to be espresso first grinders, and they don't do a terribly good job at filter. And the All Ground claims to do all grounds extremely well. And how exactly it does that is fascinating. But before we get into that, let's talk about the looks. Obviously, this grinder looks fantastic. Anyone who's come into my kitchen while I've had it on my bar has said, wow, that is a nice looking grinder. And if you're gonna pay $1,100 for something and it's gonna sit on your counter 24 hours a day, it should look good. It comes in a lot of different finishes, so whatever your kitchen aesthetic, you should be able to find something that looks great. You also operate it with this little touchscreen right here, that it's well designed, it looks nice, and it's nice and snappy, feels fun to use, and it just looks great. Now let's talk about workflow. So this is a hopper style grinder, which means you load the beans in here, you make an adjustment, press a button, and the grinds come out. It is a stepped grinder, which means it's got steps in between each grinder setting that are adjustable by this wheel up here. And as you go in between filter to mocha, for mocha pots, to espresso, you'll see settings change on the touchscreen. It has pre-programmed modes for espresso for both single and double espressos, and for mocha and filter coffee, basically you just press the button and let it run until you have as much coffee as you want, and then you turn it off. It's got this dosing bin for doing filter or mocha pot coffee, and it's got a holder here so you can put your portafilter right into it and grind right into it. Very handy, makes for very fast workflow when you're making coffee in the morning. Now, just a note to those of you new to this style of grinder, when you are making adjustments, you only want to do that when it's running. That'll help you avoid damage to the grinder. But what I do want to say about this grinder is that while it can go coarse into a filter setting, lots of other grinders can do that, and that's not what makes it special. I'll tell you what does make it special in just a sec. But first, I want to show you something really cool. Now, one feature of the All Ground that is kind of really a standout amongst other grinders in its class is how easy it is to clean. And I'm just going to show you here in real time how fast and easy this is. You take out your hopper, you turn your dial all the way to the coarsest setting, then you press down this little button right here, turn it a little more, pop off the collar, and take your burr out. Now you're ready to clean. It's super fast and super easy to get into the burrs and to start cleaning around in there every time you want to give it a little freshen up. It's so easy that I've been cleaning after every single bag of coffee. Now you don't need to do that, but it is very easy to clean, and the access in here, as well as how smooth it all is in here, makes for a lot less retention and super easy access, really cool. Now let's talk about performance and one of the coolest features of this grinder. These are 64mm flat burrs. You'll see 64mm flat burrs in lots of espresso grinders, and the grinder runs at 1600 RPM. Now, it grinds really fast. When I'm grinding 18 grams of espresso, I can be finished in as little as 7 to 8 seconds, and that's just lightning quick when you're grinding coffee in the morning. But I want to tell you the secret sauce of the Fiorenzato All Ground, and it is these burrs right here. Now, these burrs aren't made by anybody else. They're made by Fiorenzato, and you can only get them from Fiorenzato. They're made with M340 steel, very common in a titanium coating, but what makes them unique is how they respond across a wide variety of grind settings. And most burrs are not like this. Now, not to get too much into the science, but these burrs offer what's called a unimodal particle distribution at coarse settings and a bimodal particle distribution at fine settings. Basically what that means is when you're grinding fine enough for espresso, it's going to produce more fines, which is something desirable in an espresso setting. Makes for a denser puck and really helps you get some extra body out of your espresso shots. However, when you're grinding for filter, you don't want that because it can muddy up your brews, cause stalling on your filter brews. At filter settings, you want a grinder that does not produce fines. And what is really unique about this is when you are grinding coarse for filter, it will respond in that way. And as you adjust it down to espresso, it will start to shift where it starts to produce more fines. And that means you get crystal clear filter cups, but you also get denser pucks and better shots than you might with other burr sets. Now, that is a lot of big words, so I'm just gonna put it very simply. This grinder does something that is very uncommon. It makes excellent filter coffee, and then at espresso settings, it responds differently and makes wonderful espresso as well. It's truly rare, and especially at this price. Now, that leads me to a question that I know I'm going to get asked, and I don't really want to answer, but I'm going to. And that is, how does this grinder compare to the Niche Zero? Now, I hesitated to answer this question because while both grinders claim to be able to do both filter and espresso, they are wildly different grinders. The Niche has a conical burr set, while this has a flat burr set, and that results in different flavors. If you have questions about that, just hit me in the comments and we can have a brief conversation and I'll help you find the right flavor profile for you. The Niche is a single dosing grinder, which means you measure out 1 dose of beans at a time and dump them into the grinder. While this is a hopper style workflow where you have your bag loaded at all times and it's ready to go to grind you a cup of coffee. The Niche is also marketed as a zero retention grinder. It's designed to hold as little beans as possible inside the grinder once you're kind of done grinding, whereas this is not really designed that way. It does have a little bit of retention. What I can say is that both grinders offer a different flavor profile for espresso. However, when it comes to filter coffee, it's my opinion that this coffee grinder does a much better job giving you the grind quality you need to make an excellent cup of filter coffee. You can make filter coffee with the Niche, however, it's got a lot more of those fines than this grinder will have at that setting. So what do I like about this grinder? Number one, the looks and the build quality are outstanding. The thing is so heavy and beefy, and you take it out of the box and you feel like you're holding something that would be as much at home in a cafe as it would in your kitchen. It looks fantastic sitting on your counter, which makes the partner buy-in a lot easier. Coupled with the fact that it's the only grinder you need for espresso and filter, that just makes for a much easier conversation with your spouse versus you trying to convince somebody that, hey, maybe we need 2 different types of coffee grinder to sit on the counter. With this, you're gonna get 1 grinder and it's going to do the whole spectrum for you. It's also super fast to use and the workflow is very intuitive. Cleaning is so easy. It's probably the easiest grinder that I've ever had to clean. The way that burr just pops out is really a nice feature. Also, it's relatively low retention, which is nice. Definitely the thing that I like about it the most is that burr distribution profile that gives you very different responses that optimizes it for both filter and espresso grinds. That is something that is really a standout. Now, there are some things that I don't like. Even though it's relatively low on the retention is still there. It's around 1 to 2 grams when I tested it for filter and just over 2 grams when I tested it for espresso. And there's no way to kind of knock that out or purge it. Now, Fiorenzato says that they are releasing a bellows attachment for the top of this, which can adapt it for a single dosing workflow. But as of right now, there's no way to purge the beans. So you've got to just tap it and grind a little bit extra if you're changing settings. And that is a little bit more wasteful than a single dosing grinder. Something else about it, and this is really more to do with any hopper workflow, is if you want to change coffee beans when you're midway through a bag, it's not the easiest thing to do. You kind of got to take your hopper out, empty it out, or just load other beans directly in. It's a little bit clunky if you want to change beans in between. This might not be an issue if you only work through 1 bag of coffee at a time. It's really more of an issue if you want to be switching bags very often. Also, and this one is kind of funny, but it's a little bit tall. It comes in at 17 inches, which depending on your kitchen layout, your counter height, your cabinet height, it might actually be a little bit tall to go under some cabinets. Now, the big question, is this the right coffee grinder for you? And I'm gonna say, if you are the type of person who you keep 4 or 5 bags of coffee open and you kind of flip-flop depending on your mood, you know, maybe in the morning you do the medium roast and in the afternoon you're doing the light roast and then you're switching to decaf in the evening and you're kind of bouncing all over the place, you might want to look at a single dosing grinder. A single dosing grinder, you have to measure out each beans every time and before you put them into the grinder, but if that's really important to you, you might want to consider something something like that. However, if you're a busy person and you just want one grinder to do espresso and filter, you want it all covered, you don't want to be looking at multiple grinders, you don't want single dosing, you only have one bag of coffee open at a time and you work through it and then you put in a new bag, this is a really fantastic option. That burr set really sets this grinder apart from other grinders that would be similar to it and gives you a great grind response in both filter and espresso, and that is rare. It also comes in at a fairly reasonable price for an espresso grinder. Espresso grinders aren't cheap, and if you've been shopping around, you know that, and it's not crazy expensive. It's not a small chunk of change at $1,100 either, but you're gonna save that because you don't need to buy a second grinder for your filter coffee. And I can tell you, as a busy dad and husband, when you start having conversations with your partner about investing in a hobby, the fewer number of things that you need to get started make for an easier conversation. And the AllGround really does meet all of those needs. It does all the grounds for all the different types of brewing very well. And it looks great in the process. So if that sounds like you, this may very well be the next grinder for you. Now, I want to know what you think about this grinder. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you like the workflow? Do you not love it? What do you think about it? Let me know below. And if this video was helpful at all, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel. We'll see you next time. Happy brewing.